I want to talk about how we judge our past self or selves and past choices, past creations, even failings that we view us as having in the past. One of the core principles we teach in this work is to get into the creative structure, whereby you're not looking at your desired reality as better, therefore you're not labeling your future self as better. Because of course, if you do that, you are defining your present self as worse, which sets up an unequal opposing identities, which keeps us separate from our desired life. So in the creative structure, we get to a place of seeing the present and the future as equal, neither better nor worse, just different. And to start with today, I actually want to acknowledge that we need to also extend that back into our past. It can be very easy for us to look back and think, God, that was horrible. You know, I'm so glad I'm not in that place anymore. That was so much worse. Life back then was so much worse. But of course, that same principle applies. This time, by labeling the past as worse, you're labeling the present as better, and you're still creating a structure whereby you're resisting some reality. And it's a reality you're no longer in, but it's still a problem-solving perspective. You're putting the past into your structure and pushing away from it. And when we give it energy, including negative energy, we're giving it focus. So we're holding ourselves to it and giving it power. So it holds us back and we create oscillation. Pushing away from it will only mean we swing back because we've placed it in our structure. Essentially, like, you know, imagine tying a rubber band around us and the old reality, the old self, which is why we use the double bubble, right? To release resistance so we can accept any reality, even the ones we fear and resist the most. And that's a massively powerful thing. It's so liberating when you stop giving it power and saying, I don't have to resist it. I'm okay. I'm okay if that happens. I don't have to put my focus there at all. But I've noticed, even if we get to that place of accepting any reality, you know, saying, I don't have to give it power or resist that anymore, sometimes we still haven't accepted old versions of ourselves. Not old realities, but old identities, old choices, old decisions. We can accept an old reality by saying, you know, as my current self, yes, I could choose that. I could live through that now. I don't resist that happening now or happening again. But we haven't necessarily accepted the old version of ourself that created that in the first place. Who can see that there's a difference there? We think, yeah, I could handle that reality now. I could choose it. I'd make different choices this time. I'd see it a little differently, you know, which is true because you're not the same identity anymore. But it can catch us out a little because it can feel easier to accept a circumstance than it can be to accept who we once were. Because it's easier to look at a circumstance or reality as not being personal compared to looking at how we once thought and behaved and acted, who we were showing up as, you know, as not being personal. And sometimes, yeah, it is powerful. Yeah. And sometimes if we're truly honest with ourselves, we realize that what we think is, I could accept that past reality, but I haven't yet accepted the person I used to be. We can still look back with judgment to the person who actually created that and who maybe didn't change that for a long time, who maybe made things even harder for a while before choosing to create anything different. So today I actually want to dive into how we view past versions of ourselves, not just past reality, past selves, and how those assessments and judgments can create pain and suffering and limitation. Yeah, you've been thinking lately about times in your past when you had huge opportunities, didn't believe in yourself enough to say yes. Looking back now, if time travel were possible, I would totally say yes. Yes, your new identity would say yes. The old one perhaps didn't feel able to. So just a warning, this may not be easy, right? This is a deep topic. Like I said, it was yesterday, it just became so clear this needed to be discussed because of a conversation I had. But so I'm going to ask you to look at some big questions. And please just choose to be of service to yourself and really see the truth. You know, is there anything there? What's really true? So, what are the ways we torment ourselves and even abuse ourselves because of our past? Well, we can disapprove of who we once were, looking upon them with judgment. You know, for example, oh, how naive I was, or how embarrassing I used to do that, or how stupid I was. Yeah, yeah, a big topic. Yes. Yeah, and you know, we can condemn our past choices, thinking that was bad. I did a horrible thing, perhaps. And to save us from the pain of feeling that blame or shame, it can feel easier for us to just reject that old version of us, denounce them. You know, that's not me anymore. I don't even want to think about how I used to be. That wasn't okay. I'll never be like that again. Perfect timing. Yes, thank you. It became clear this was, you know, time to speak about this. Yeah. Yeah, beating up the past version of me that I've labeled stupid. Exactly. Perfect example. And you know, when we condemn, when we condemn, we can convict, right? And as we've talked about, we can get into that desire to punish, right? Remember, we spoke about this in the session I did on addiction to punishment. If we judge our former self as guilty of doing something wrong, our mind can take it to mean, okay, punishment is required then, or we must atone, we must make amends, or we feel the need to redeem ourselves. And sometimes we do it in such a sly way that we don't even recognize we're doing it. Sometimes it's the way we look at our present identity, right? Think about this. What about when we say, I'm a better person now. I'm a good person now. I'm more evolved now, whatever it is. And although they are, you know, positive thoughts, what are the silent instructions? What's the hidden implication? We're saying, back then, I was a worse person, a bad person, a lesser person. Sometimes we reprimand our old selves because it allows us to feel like we've bettered ourselves. We're superior now. We're above that old self. So therefore, well, I couldn't possibly ever make mistakes like that ever again. And no one can ever judge me like they used to before. And no one can say those same things that they once said to me anymore. Yeah, hitting home, yeah. Yeah. So we can abuse the old identity to make the current identity feel better. And notice, if we're condemning, reprimanding, disapproving of our old self, then we've made those actions and creations of the past personal. We've actually gotten into blaming our old self for the suffering we endured. And often we carry that blame with us, still blaming ourselves for our past. Yeah, that's been your tape, right? Why did I spend the last 6 years as a victim? Why couldn't I get off the couch? What happened to the person that went for what she wanted and got it? What happened to the confident, courageous me? Exactly. Amazing unpacking. Those are all, you know, precisely the examples I want everyone to realize. If you're running these tapes, these thoughts in your mind, yeah, easy to fall into. Yes, exactly. And you know, sometimes we try to separate ourselves across time, so to speak, you know, looking back and thinking, I blame them, not me. It was my old self that did that, but that's not me anymore. Which again gets us into rejecting our past identity, rejecting our past experience of life, pushing away from it, and so creating oscillation. See, we push away from it because when we blame, we're saying that what happened was wrong or the person was at fault, right? The difference between taking responsibility and taking the blame is that the blame carries the judgment over what happens, which of course makes us want to move away from that thing because it was bad, it was wrong, whatever the judgment is. Not allowed, not acceptable. Yeah, Rachel, like overdoing things to the point of injury over and over. Yeah. And I believe there's a book called Super Survivors that talks about this self-protection structure that people often get into that causes us to place blame. When we blame, it's your fault. We protect ourselves from having to feel for that person. So if we apply that to our past and our former self, we may use this structure of blame to try to protect our current self from feeling the pain of our own past trauma by avoiding empathizing with our past experience when we're seeing our former self as a victim. Maybe the pain of judgment for who we once were is easier than the pain of feeling like a victim to our trauma. Yeah. And the other protection we receive from that structure of victim blaming is it also allows us to pretend that as long as we don't make the same choices again, we're safe, right? If we don't make the same choices as that victim, we're safe. So we can never go through that kind of pain and suffering again, which isn't true. But it can feel safer to judge and blame our old self under the false idea it will prevent repeated suffering, right? And notice how that stick energy. There's a belief, if I push away from my old self enough, never allow myself to be like that again, then I'll never have to go through what I went through ever again. See that assumption? Yeah. Repeat. Is it clear? Do you need me to repeat anything now, or did it become clear? Yeah, I chose victim to avoid responsibility. I can see that now. Right. Yeah. And the question is, are you judging yourself for that choice of choosing the victim perspective? Yeah. See, we, as powerful creators, we know we can simply choose a different experience without, judging our old identities. That's not actually necessary, right? We don't need stick energy. We talk about the carrot and the stick. We don't need the stick energy. We don't ever have to suffer in that way that we did in our past, but out of choice, not because we're avoiding the decisions and the circumstances that once created them or avoiding that identity. To avoid or run away from is not a powerful perspective. That's actually a powerless victim perspective. If I make sure the conditions are never like that again, then I can avoid it. Placing the power in the conditions rather than knowing that you are powerful enough to choose to simply create a different experience. Yes. Yeah. Yeah, exactly. You did. You got to some powerful truth. Now you're noticing, yeah, still sticking myself for it. Yeah. So ask yourself, have you placed a label on past identities? Have you defined them a certain way? Back then, were you bad or wrong or stupid or weak, naive? We're so conditioned to associate moral judgment with consequences and obligations, punishment, atonement, redemption, repentance. So if you judge your past self to be bad, or wrong, what will likely happen is either you dissociate, right? Try and create separation by lying to yourself and telling yourself they're not you. It's not me anymore. It's nothing to do with me as I am now. Seeing them almost like we can get into seeing them kind of like a separate entity, which as we've covered, we do it because it makes it easier to accept what happened or to ignore it or to forget it, although we can't truly forget. Another thing that might happen is that, okay, you're accepting that it was you, but in which case, if they were bad, well, that means you were bad. And so you are the one that needs to be held accountable or punished or redeem yourself, make up for it, whatever it is. Yeah. Yeah, I hated that version of myself. If only I'd have been stronger. Yep. Often saying, if I only knew then what I know now. Exactly. See that regret? Yeah, yeah. Yeah, you can see you're saying it, I'm the bad one. Yeah. So ask, what's that doing for you in your current reality? What are the consequences of you actually defining yourself as bad? Have you created consequences or obligations or contracts because of that. And as we're going through this, remember, we do this on a micro level as well, right? Like right after we do something, we often think, oh, why did I just do that? You know, we judge so easily. And we feel the frustration or the guilt or the shame or whatever it is. We can get into justification or judgment, and neither serve us. Both actually reinforce a powerless identity, right? I did it because all these reasons, i.e., it wasn't just out of choice. We weren't in our power. Or maybe we think, well, I couldn't stop myself. Again, powerless identity that we're reinforcing. So, how else do we look at our past in ways that don't serve us? Yep. You can see it. It's making me try to move away from myself. Exactly. It creates internal struggle rather than external with someone else. Interesting. Yeah. You know, we can look upon our past with regret, which is what I can see coming up in a few of your comments. You know, if I hadn't done that, then I wouldn't have had to go through all that. Or, oh, if I just stopped then, I could have avoided all of that. I don't know if you can hear that siren. I'll just maybe wait for a second for it to go. There we go. Or, you know, like one of you typed in, if only I knew then what I knew now. If only I could change that decision. Wishing we'd made different choices, right? And that can actually keep us stuck in emotions like resentment, you know, resenting our former selves, or shame, or, you know, maybe even guilt, especially if our actions impacted others. You know, maybe we caused others harm or suffering too. But notice, we only feel regret for something if we're holding on to it, haven't yet let it go. Again, still keeping us stuck. And again, in the powerless perspective, because what are we most often saying when we say we regret it? What are we saying? We're saying that past choice takes away from my power to create. Can you see that? So now that past action, choice, result, whatever it is, that has the power, not you. You want to change it because to you, you're saying it has power. Can you see that? Yeah. So many years of active addiction and poor decisions, still feel like I need to prove I'm not her anymore. Yeah. I've been in recovery for 36 years. This stuff really sticks. Yeah. And I know that, you know, the 12-step model of recovery really reinforces all these things I'm talking about. That judgment, the blame, the being guilty for what you've done, needing to make up for it, all the rest of it. And keeping yourself attached to that old identity. Yeah, exactly. Yeah. I just wrote an article on that actually. Yeah. Oh man, didn't even realize I was doing that. I turned the resentment I was feeling towards someone else inwards, right? Yeah. So now that we've unpacked this a bit, I have some big questions for you today, and I know you're already starting to answer them. But let's go through these consciously. So ask yourself, do you hold any resentment or blame towards your old self? Yeah, like they weren't big enough, right? I told you it would be a big session. I did warn you. But a powerful one, right? And second question, are you holding your past or present self to punishment of any kind? Notice, is it creeping in anywhere? Do you have any thoughts of, you know, maybe even something like, maybe I don't deserve the life I truly want? You know, after everything I've done and being that person, maybe I don't deserve what I want. Yeah, punishment and accountability, yeah. And do you reject your old identity or your past self in any way? And an easy way to recognize if you are doing these things is by listening to your thoughts when you think about the past, which I know this is what I can see you're already doing this, but you know, yeah, do you ever think, for example, why did I create that? Or why did it take me so long to realize something you now know, right? Or why did I buy into that? Why didn't I something? Or why did I something? Just want you to really shine a light on whether or not you're having thoughts like these or anything similar. Just bringing total honesty, right? Do you judge? Do you blame? Do you resent who you were? Or even who you are? Yeah. And I'm not doing this so that you judge the fact that you've been judging. Let's stop that cycle. But let's really acknowledge what's true. Bring our minds to this awareness. Yeah, why? Then try to figure it out. Can't figure it out, so where do I go from there? Yeah. See how there is so much power in past actions, past decisions, past creations. And then you're trying to figure it out because it has so much power. You need to figure out a way around it. How can I fix this? It's that problem solving again. Yeah, I've tried so hard to pretend I'm not thinking this way. Yeah. So isn't it just incredible that right now you're acknowledging the truth? I want you to really acknowledge yourself for what you're doing right now in just seeing the truth, seeing that you've maybe denied some things, lied to yourself, skewed the truth. Yeah, it feels healing. Good. Yeah, figure it out so don't do it again. Right, yeah. Got to avoid it, can't do it again. Yeah. One of the disservices and detrimental impacts that personal development teachers and programs out there have is that they tell us outright to, kill the old identity or let the ego die, it's such a bad thing, it's selfish, all this stuff. And it encourages us to abuse ourselves, right? Even to feel hatred or, all these things. I noticed how it can get us into looking at our past self like they're a different person, a separate entity, one to fear or hate or reject. Sometimes when we bring all of that judgment, we can't help but separate ourselves. Like, who is that person? I don't even feel like I know them. I don't resonate with who I was anymore. Because we've labeled them as, so bad or so unacceptable, whatever it is. When we do that, we're creating a false sense of separation from our own self. Dissociation. Granted, it was you when you were showing up in a different way. Yes, a different arrangement of self, a different understanding and expression of self, but it was still you. And you're either in denial that it was really you, which creates all sorts of dissonance and dis-ease when we're actually trying to lie to ourselves. There are aspects of ourselves that simply know the truth. So it really can create a lot of dis-ease, dissonance, all sorts of things showing up. Or so either do that, separate yourself, or you are still associated with your past experience of self. And therefore, when you start pushing all this negative energy towards that old self, you are not only the giver, you are also the receiver, right? Yeah, we aren't truly split into past, present, future, right? When we judge the things we did yesterday or even 50 years ago, we feel that judgment now. We don't send it back into the past where it's received by someone else. We're sending it to ourselves in this present moment. The present is all we experience, right? Just as we can intentionally step into experiencing our future self, we can equally, intentionally or not, revert to the experience that the old self had. That's not to say you can ever go back to being them. When true transformation occurs, we can't go back, nor would you want to. Just as Dixie has said before, the butterfly can't revert back into being the caterpillar. But you can take yourself back into the pain that you once experienced. You can recreate the experience of your past self. And you can feel the impact of that judgment just as tangibly as if it were coming from someone else, right? Yeah. Some do say, some teachers do say flat out, your old identity, I think you're saying, was worthless. You're still there because you don't want it, or you're not trying hard enough, you don't care enough. Yeah, so much. Yeah, punishment, judgment, and yeah, it's it's abusive. I just realized that the old identity was seeking freedom from unbearable conditions. I'm still seeking freedom today. Yeah. 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 So really acknowledging, you know, when we judge even our past self, we feel it. Just as much as if we thought someone else was judging us, right? We've all felt judged before, right? Whether or not we truly were, we don't know, right? We don't know really what is going through someone else's mind, but we've all perceived ourselves as having been judged, right? And our default setting is to interpret that as painful because it threatens our belonging. We come wired to find connection, avoid rejection. So we naturally fear judgment because it opens us up to potential rejection, which threatens belonging and survival, right? And it opens us up to having our wounded beliefs seen as true. You know, that's what we really fear deep down. You know, we all create wounded beliefs as a child. We all grow up, and we all grow up being subconsciously afraid of anyone finding out that that belief is true, right? Like, you know, for example, I'm afraid that people will come to realize that I am unworthy, or that, yeah, I don't belong, or that I'm not in control, or whatever it is. For us, in our subconscious, that false belief feels to us like the unspeakable truth. We believe it's true. And so we're afraid of anyone else finding out that it's true. So of course we fear judgment. You know, it's one of the most prevalent fears in the world, but there's always something that follows. You know, I'm afraid of being judged because I believe I'll be rejected, because I believe I'll be shamed, because I believe they'll find out the truth, that I'm not perfect, whatever it is. So we are literally creating one of our own worst nightmares, right? By creating the judgment that is placed onto ourselves. You can see that. And we can be the harshest critic when it comes to ourselves. Who knows that's true, right? We all know our weak spots, the things that hurt the most, the things we fear the most. We can't hide them from ourselves. So when we turn on ourselves, we're certainly able to inflict far more pain than anyone else could, far more easily, right? Who knows very well that their inner critic can be more hurtful than anyone else in their life. I've always been my harshest critic, and I've inflicted more suffering upon myself than anyone else probably ever could, even if they tried. Yeah, true, definitely, yeah, yeah. Oh, I've missed some chat, lots of comments. Yeah. My 7-year-old twins can create non-desired behaviors when they don't have the skill to deal with the situation. Oh, yeah. I give them grace for that. I'm realizing I don't give myself the same grace for doing the best I could in a situation when you didn't have the skills to manage. Yes. Yeah. Yeah. So, you know, beautiful awareness. And now that you've noticed that, maybe you can start consciously making the effort to hold yourself in grace, just as you do for them. You know how to do it. You do it for them. Now you do it for yourself. Yeah, you can't say anything to me that's meaner than what I say to myself. Yeah, that is usually exactly true. Yeah. See, when you pass judgment or project regret or blame or punishment onto your past self, you'll feel it now. You'll notice you feel the guilt, the shame, the pain. It torments you now, and it's abusive. We can be pretty mean to ourselves. And when someone is tormented or abused, we know that they usually either turn inwards and withdraw, or that pain is turned outwards in ways that aren't true to them, right? Often aren't healthy, aren't in true choice. So notice if you're experiencing any of that. Notice if you're actually suppressing yourself. Judgment is a very constricting energy that will inevitably limit and suppress your expression of self in the present. Judging your old self limits your present self. I want you to hear that. You know, either by putting something off limits, I'm not allowed to go anywhere near that again, you know, creating rules about what you can or can't do, or creating fear of slipping back, or holding you to that definition of self. You know, I'm a person who lets themselves do those things, you know, or create those things that I'm judging. Judging your past limits your present. Yeah, you're noticing you're turning inwards, withdrawing the past few days. Yeah. When we judge those past behaviors, choices, actions, and creations, we're making it personal. So we're actually creating a definition of that self, saying, This means I was bad or a failure or stupid. And when we define, when we judge, when we label, we limit. We put our former self in a box, stick a label on them, and then hold them to it. And isn't that holding us to it? You know, in the field, all is now. Time doesn't exist. You are simultaneously, you know, all versions of yourself. They all exist and all can be true in the field. Our choice is which arrangement of self we bring into any given moment. It's choice. None are right, none are wrong. None are better or more righteous or more worthy. None are worse or bad or less than. And it does not ever, you know, our choice of self-arrangement or expression does not ever affect the truth of who we are. Our true self is unwavering in its perfection and sacredness and wholeness. No choice or action or creation in the world will ever mar that truth. And doing this work, I hope we can all recognize that, to answer all those questions we had of why did I do that? Why did I blah, blah, blah? The answer is quite simple. You were operating out of your structure at that time, seeing through the lens of that old identity, understanding yourself and life with the model of the world you'd created in your mind. Most likely you saw things very differently. Most likely you were not aware of many things you are now aware of. Most likely you felt far more limited, restricted, and powerless than you do now. Back then, you didn't know any different. Or maybe you knew different, but it didn't feel available to you. So I would like us, even just self-consciously right now, to choose to bring understanding and compassion into our lens when we're looking backwards into our past. And really just honor the journey we've been on. Isn't it true that that past self suffered? Isn't it true that that past self did try to stop that suffering? Whether they managed efficiently or effectively or not, they tried. You got to give them that. Even if they gave up, it was only because that seemed like the best option at the time. Let's really just honor our past, honor our experiences, honor our old identity, honor who we once were. Yeah, exactly. People do the best they can with the tools they have at the time. Yep. Yeah, now you're saying people do the best they can with the structure and identity they have at the time. Exactly. Need to remind yourself it applies to you too. Exactly. Yeah. Just recognize, you know, it wasn't always, perhaps it never was easy for us back then. Bring compassion to that. How would it feel if you just chose to hold all past versions of yourself in absolute love? Right now, I want you to try it. Can you open your heart to them and welcome them in for a metaphorical hug? Just become truly accepting of who you were, knowing there are reasons why, knowing it was never personal. When you look at past creations, you're looking at the result of a past structure, that's all. You're not looking at how great or not you were. Your structure created those results, not you. And we create our structures, but we don't initially create them consciously. It was all subconscious and superconscious in the beginning. But every decision you ever made, from any awareness, every decision that went into creating those structures was made with the intention of serving you. You are always coming from a place of pure intentions. You are always trying to be of service to yourself. Who can see that that's true? You are always trying to be of service to yourself. And isn't that a noble thing? Isn't that a beautiful thing to choose to be of service? And that's all you were ever choosing to do. That doesn't mean every structure that was created was of service, you know, in the way that you wanted it to be, but make no mistake, you know, your objective, your aim, your goal was always to increase satisfaction and decrease pain overall for yourself. And you can't hate or judge or dismiss yourself for that. In fact, you can be thankful, grateful, appreciative. Yeah, hugging our younger selves. Yeah. Oh, that's really beautiful. Catherine, I recently set up a large photo of myself in my early 20s to look at every day and send her love and compassion. My small child was easier than this one, but it's really helping me see her true identity. Yeah. That's a really nice thing to do. That's amazing. So we are running short on time. So let's do a process. Let's do a process. Do any of you feel just a little bit of resistance right now? Some stuff maybe been brought to the surface? Yes. Yeah. So what I would love to recommend as the choice for today, I would really love us all to have go in with the same true choice. That is, I choose to experience my full self in wholeness and love. So that's what I would like to offer to you as the true choice for today. And remember, full self means all aspects of you, the light and the dark, the seen and the shadowed, the accepted and rejected. So I choose to experience my full self in wholeness and love. And you know, often when you bring something, including parts of yourself, out from the darkness, so to speak, and shine a light on them, they transform. Just like a plant that's been kept in the dark, you know, withered, maybe it's lost its beauty. You bring it into the sunshine, you can watch as it blooms. You know, it produces beautiful flowers that perhaps you never even knew it could create. Yeah. So, are we all good to go with that choice?